Hello everybody, I am not dead yet, and today I want to talk about bodybuilding, more specifically all the deaths related to bodybuilding and what I think can be done to sort of kind of mitigate the deaths and reduce that, because we are seeing bodybuilders drop like flies left, right, and freaking center, and I think something needs to be done to help ensure not only the safety of the athletes, but also just the longevity of the sport in general. If bodybuilders keep dying, like who's gonna continue the sport, right? Now, this video is sort of a pseudo part 2 / continuation to the video I made previously talking about the death of Cedric McMillan, which I will link somewhere around here. You do not actually have to watch that one to understand what I'm saying in this one, but I would appreciate it if you gave it a watch. I think I have some interesting insights to say, and also some of the footage I used for this was meant to be part of that video, so as you'll see in the next scene, the background behind me gets a little bit darker, but I've realized that what I have to say could be made into its own video, and so here it is. I think, again, just as a quick recap of what I said in the last video, that a lot of these deaths are related to mentality, and that athletes in general are sort of conditioned to give everything for their sport. They give their all, including their life, or to continue pushing even if it's at the detriment to their health, simply because that's kind of what you have to do to make it at the top level, to be competitive, because at the end of the day, if whatever you are unwilling to do, or whatever you are unwilling to sacrifice, and I've always said this, there is someone out there who is not only willing to do it, or can do it, but is doing it with ease and will sacrifice whatever in a heartbeat. So you have to be the person that is willing to give everything. And I've said it before, like, I have to scare the boogeyman. I have to outwork everybody that it's outworking me, right? And so with that mentality ingrained deeply into the mentality of a lot of athletes, I think that is very much kind of something that leads to a lot of these injuries, depending on the sport, or, in the case of bodybuilding, death. And so, with that, what do I think needs to be done? The rules need to be changed. Because of the nature of high-level sport, the rules are in place to protect the athletes from themselves. There are a lot of athletes, in boxing in particular, who will refuse to throw in the towel, refuse to go down. They will continue to take a beating. That's why the ref is there. The ref is there to stop fights when things are just too bad, but the athlete, the boxer, the fighter refuses to stop. He keeps pushing forward. That's why the ref is there. And that is why rounds in boxing, championship rounds, were reduced from 15 to 12. Because in the olden days of boxing, people were dying or getting seriously injured in those last 3 rounds. Why? Because, especially in the heavyweights, athletes would get too tired to keep their hands up. They'd be just so exhausted from the 12 previous rounds of fighting. But they're still trained fighters. So while they wouldn't be able to keep their hands up and defend, they could still throw a punch that had their body weight behind it. So in those last 3 rounds, you'd get 2 guys who are just dead exhausted, who had given everything, but they refuse to go down. So they're standing there in the ring just slugging at each other with the hardest punches they can take until one of them eventually drops. And a lot of them didn't get back up after that. A lot of fighters were rushed to the hospital afterwards. Some died, some were crippled for life. It became such a regular occurrence that crippling or potentially killing somebody in the ring was seen as something that could end a champion's career depending on how he deals with it. Rocky Marciano, what is one of the fights that is more commonly regarded as his most difficult fight, was against a man named Bingo Vingo, because Vingo, his fighting style was very risky, and he took a lot of risks to get that one big punch knockout, hit the bingo. It's like when he got knocked out, it's like, oh, bingo, got it, finally. And when he went up against Marciano, I'm pretty sure Marciano like cracked his skull and sent skull fragments into his brain. And Vingo survived but could never box again. And after that, people were wondering whether or not Marciano would be able to mentally overcome nearly killing somebody and actively crippling someone and continue to box after that. That's how bad things got. So they eventually took a step back and said, listen, the athletes are willing to do whatever. These are tenacious people. They're stubborn people. You have to be to do this. So we're going to protect them from themselves. We are reducing the round limit from 15 to 12 because a lot less people have died or gotten crippled in that time. And I think something like that needs to happen to bodybuilding. What? I'm not entirely sure. Because, like, drug testing, one, it's hard. I'm sure that there's ways around it. I don't know too much about, how to skirt a drug test because I'm natural. Ooh, I know my physique's impressive. I know, but I'm natural. But I don't, and again, people want to see the mass monsters, the big stuff, and trying to do something like limit the amount of drugs used or ban specific PDs but not others just seems like really like something that'll lead to a lot of confusion and complication, and I don't really see that discussion going anywhere. Greg Doucette has often touted creating new divisions as the answer, so it's not just take a bunch of drugs or not. You can give people different options. If you don't want to be an open bodybuilder, go to men's physique, etc., etc. My solution, and I think going along with that idea of a separate division, I think a Mr. Olympia natural division would be at the very least a step in the right direction. Now, I don't know how that would go in terms of funding or whatever, but I think that we should have a natural division because one of the main arguments against creating new divisions or a natural division is people are going to be like, oh, well, people want to see the mass monsters, they want to see the freaks. But my counter to that is, wouldn't you want to see what is like the natural human limit? Because sure, like, yeah, okay, the PDs and whatever, but like, wouldn't you want to see what is achievable without all the drugs? Like what is like the peak natural human physique? I'd definitely like to see that. And I think that if we make it a very hard line that once you take anything, you can never compete as a natural again, I think that would actively help people or discourage people from becoming unnatural in the first place. Because it's the same way that amateur boxing and professional boxing works. In the amateurs, you can be amateur for your entire life. Like, there are people I've seen people who are in their 60s have amateur boxing matches. But the second you turn pro, you give up your amateur card. You cannot fight in the amateurs anymore. And so I think that acts as an active deterrent for people that want to turn pro, because pro is dangerous, pro is serious. And so if you want to turn pro, if you love boxing and really love it, and you really want to try and go for it and you give it your best swing at the pros, then go ahead. But know that as soon as you cross that line, you are never going back. You cannot say, oh shoot, pro is not for me, I'm going to go back into amateurs. And again, there might be some exceptions and some changes or whatever. So I don't, don't come after me for that, but that's generally how it's portrayed. If we do the same thing for natural competitions, then maybe someone can be like, well, I can still go to the Olympia, I can still compete at the Olympia. Do I really want to take the PDs? Like, I can still be in the Olympia natural, I can still look amazing, I can still have people recognize me for my physique. Do I really want to cross that line and never be able to compete naturally again? I don't know. And I think with that, along with, again, the divisions like men's physique and versus open bodybuilding, etc., for the people who are already on gear, can actively help kind of discourage people from taking PDs can actively help discourage them from taking PDs, because it's no longer their only option if they want to make it as a pro or go to the Olympia. I think at the very least, it's not a perfect solution, and there are definitely a lot of kind of bends to iron out in it, but I think that, to me, would be a good start and a good system to at least start thinking about implementing. Hi, so I'd like to add a little bit of an addendum to what I said previously, because when I said that I don't think removing drugs or drug testing the Olympia would be a good idea, and I don't think the conversation would lead anywhere, I meant completely removing drugs from the Olympia altogether. No drugs, it's a completely drug-tested event, similar to boxing, right? You're not allowed to have any drugs, no PDs at all. However, I just recently watched Greg Doucette's recent video on this matter, where he talked about Fuad's solution, as well as Fuad copy striking down a video. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I actually really like the idea he proposes of having a drug-tested Olympia. However, I think that the drug-tested Olympia and my idea for the natural Olympia should be two separate things. The main difference being that the natural is you are deemed natural if you have never done any sort of performance-enhancing drugs, whereas the drug-tested Olympia would be for someone like Big Ramy, like Chris Bumstead, and anybody else who have already hopped on gear but decide, you know what, I still want to compete, but I want to do it natural, so they get off all of the gear for, I don't know, a certain amount of time, and then they get drug tested and then compete in that. So you still have the hard line of what is deemed natural, which still would discourage people from taking PEDs, because they're like, well, if I do that, then I'll lose the title of natural. I'll never be able to call myself natural again. But for those who have already crossed that line, it gives you a way to sort of still go back and still compete. You can, or if you want to keep going and pushing as much drugs as possible, you have that possibility. It leaves the athlete, it leaves a bunch of choices open to the athlete to decide what he wants to do with his own fate. Whether he wants to never touch PEDs at all and complete and stay in the natural category, whether he wants to think, okay, well, I'll push the drugs for a little bit, see how I feel, and then realize, oh no, this is bad. Heck, my physique was better natural. I'm just not a great responder to PEDs, but I looked great natural, so I'm gonna get off the gear and compete in the drug-tested division. Like, it gives people more options and allows more freedom and can allow people to be healthier if they so desire. Now, I might make this a completely separate video, but here I want to touch upon it briefly. Fuad copy striking somebody's video, I am obviously against that. I think anybody who knows that this happened should be completely outraged. I think there was a lot of outrage when Greg copy struck Geoff's video, and I've said it before in the past, that rightfully so. I view copyright strikes as a sort of big red button. It should be the absolute last resort and should never be used unless it is absolutely necessary. I think YouTube is built upon sharing content and open discussions and stuff like that. So I really do think that copyright striking a video, especially how dangerous it can be, should be seen as kind of that big red button, do not press, right? It's something you'll threaten, but hopefully never have to do. I really think Fuad is in the wrong. Hopefully he revokes the copyright strike, but I'm not going to go too far into it beyond that, because I do not know Fuad. I do not watch his content. I've never interacted with him, and I can't really say too much. If things escalate further, I might make this its own video, but we'll see how things go. But that is it for the addendum. But those are just my thoughts on this whole thing, Cedric, his passing, the mentality, and what we can do about it. If you have any thoughts or if you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think about my mentality and everything else in between. But until next time, I would just like to thank all of my Patreon supporters. Everything you guys do and all the support you give me means the world. It really helps me and encourages me to continue pushing this out. I say it in every video because it is true. If you want to help support me, all of my links, including my affiliates, as well as my Patreon and PayPal, are all in the description. Go buy some stuff from my affiliate links and help support me. If you want to, because I'm looking for sponsorships lately, so if you want to sponsor either me or a video or something like that, you can also find my business email in the description. But I believe that is it. I think I've said everything I have to say, so until the next one, I am not dead yet. Remember, only the strong subscribe, and if you are not dead either, there is always a tomorrow waiting for you.